Hello, welcome to Fabulous Friday here at Limitless Minds, Limitless Live, coming to you. I'm live from Sarasota, Florida, but Dr. Julie West live from Pennsylvania, coming on in. Friends and Family Friday, ready to get after it with one of the best colleagues I've ever had to work with, Julia.
Well, thank you. That was very nice. What are you after? No, I'm just kidding. No. It was a true compliment.
I just want more science and content. More science and content. That's what I want.
Okay, well, that's fair. I can deliver on that. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are tuning in to here at Limitless Lives. We are happy to be here with you today. I like how you changed the name, Josh, from Friends and Family Friday to Fabulous Friday.
Yeah.
Because I'm here, and that means that it is.
You got your nails. You got your nails.
I have my nails. I have my bangles. I have a ring on today. We're set.
Yeah, we're locked and loaded.
Yeah. So wait, this is going to sound strange, but in your post about today, right? I have to say I disagree with how you framed this up. Do you want to say what it is that you posted, and then I'll tell you what I always love to tell you, which is how I disagree with you.
Yeah, I said we're going to talk about how to deal with toxic people.
Yes, and you already, because you know me very well, you probably already know what I'm going to say about why that subject line didn't sit well with me, and I'll tell you why.
I already know too.
You totally know. You totally know. And we'll talk a little bit about this today, because the truth is we are going to walk through 6 strategies for dealing with toxic behavior or negative behavior that you might encounter during your day, wherever that is, at work, at home, in relationships, etc. Right? So I've given a hint about why I personally don't love the term toxic person or toxic people. Now, disclaimer, I know there are people in this world who so frequently choose to behave in toxic ways that I'm not going to take it away from anybody who's fine with that label. For me personally, I've found it's really important to me with my values and for many parts of the work that I do to show up with compassion for people. That if I got to choose one thing that people remembered about me when I'm not here anymore, I would want them to remember me as a compassionate person. So I've found it doesn't help me live my value of compassion to label a whole person as toxic.
Yep.
It gets in the way for me to be able to show up the way I like to show up. And I remember when I was in graduate school and training to become a psychologist, I often had patients that I would see that would really push my buttons, right? And I was trained to access compassion before going into sessions with these patients. And one of the ways that I did that was I looked for points of connection between myself and this person that I was having trouble getting along with. And I still do that. I still do that when I am at my best and I'm dealing with someone's behavior that's showing up really toxic or negative. And so I want to just share some other strategies that we know, you and I know as coaches and in our own lives, work really well to help us deal with other people's negative behavior, toxic behavior in ways that allow us to live our values and not let that behavior have too much of an effect on us.
That's awesome. And I want to just point out too, just to kind of reiterate the thought there, the whole key is it's behaviors are behaviors. They are separate from who we are, right, as human beings. And I think that's one of the biggest things to kind of parse out of what we just started talking about again, I remember years ago, one of the biggest things I learned from special forces in the Navy out in Coronado was, you know, we never call a person something. We call them what they're doing, and we call that out. We don't call out the person. So, in other words, you're not an a-hole, you're acting like an a-hole. So,
Sure.
acting right. So that was the whole thing, is calling out the behavior versus the person.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. We've had this conversation many times where,
Absolutely.
this is really important. And I think that this is more than just something that's worked for us or that's worked for the special forces. This is a really powerful strategy for all of us when we're dealing with behavior that rubs us the wrong way, or that is just objectively negative or harmful or unhelpful, right? That, really focusing on the behavior and not reducing an entire person to the way they're behaving in a given moment. I mean, I don't know about you, Josh, but I'm not perfect. Actually, I do know about you. You're not perfect either. None of us are, right? And I like to treat people the way I would hope that they would treat me when I'm not at my best. I make mistakes. I go negative. We all do. And the people in my life that rise to the top of my heart are the people that have been able to be around me in those moments without clearly or obviously judging me as like a bad person or a negative person. And so I want to pay that forward. I want to do that for other people too. Yeah. And just in case you would think all we're going to talk about today is empathy, you would be wrong. We actually have some practical strategies for how to deal with negative behavior or toxic behavior. We've just gone into one of them, but we want to cover several, right?
Yeah, and I think without further ado, I think we should just dive into it and really explain, okay, if I'm a leader or if I'm even just a coworker or whatever, here I am, and there are going to be things, there are going to be situations that are negative, and there are going to be people that are acting negative in my life. That's no matter where you are, that is going to happen, right? Yep. So how do you best deal with that in order to still perform at the highest or to serve that other person? Exactly. And I think that's exactly what we're going to go over. So let's just dive in. What would be the first way to deal with it?
Yeah, we started with one of my favorites, which is listen more, judge less. This is really where that all-important empathy, that is a so-called soft skill for leaders that we now know from recent research from Harvard Business Review, is actually one of the skills that is most sought after for C-suite level positions. What is formerly thought of as a soft skill are now the difference makers between levels of leadership that you can attain, right? So this listen more, judge less is a strategy that's very grounded in empathy.
And it's really interesting too, because when you start judging, where are you, right? You're inside your head.
Exactly.
And when you're inside your head, you're not outside with the other person. Thus, you're not listening. So one of the best ways to listen is to judge less.
Exactly. And one of the ways that you can judge less is to do what we started out talking about, which is judge or label rather the behavior, not the person. Hey, this thing that's happening is bothering me, not you're negative, you're toxic, or you're such and such, right? So many of us make this mistake. In psychology, it's one of the most common phenomenon documented in social psychology. It's called, do you know what I'm going to say? The fundamental attribution error. This is our tendency as people. We all do this, where we forget how much context or an environment comes into play with why other people behave the way they're behaving. We're more likely to say the way someone else is behaving is because of a character flaw or their personality, etc. Where when we judge ourselves, many times will bring context into the mix. It comes up with driving all the time. You know, when I'm speeding, this happens sometimes while I'm driving, I won't say how much. I have a good reason always in my head about why I'm speeding. I say, well, I'm late, or I'm just going with the flow of traffic, right? I'm just trying to, when someone else whizzes by me, I'm not proud of this, but my default response is like, what a maniac, right? I never call myself a maniac when I'm speeding, but that's my default for someone else.
And what's the default when somebody's going really slow in front of you?
Gosh, come on, old lady or something, right? Like something.
Basically, it's just what in that moment, it's like they just need to be exactly like me, or else it's not going to work out. This is by the way, George Carlin does a great skit on this. If you've ever seen it, it's amazing.
Yes, exactly. So one of the ways that we can show up around someone else who's behaving in a way that is coming up as negative for us or our teams is to use this approach to recognize our default is going to be to not listen and to judge. And so if we know that, if we're aware of it, we can change it.
Right.
And so we want to aim for listening more, giving, for instance, what I call the most generous interpretation. There's probably a reason. I might not know what it is. Ultimately, I might not agree with what it is, but can I be generous with my interpretation here and work on judging this person less and listening instead?
Yeah, I love that. And I think what that allows us to do too, and this is why the 6 different ways to do this are really great, because they all kind of tie in with each other.
Yeah.
So if I'm listening more and judging less, the next thing that I really want to bear into is another concept, which is respond versus react.
Absolutely.
So I want to create that space where if I'm sitting there and I'm listening and I'm feeling myself be triggered by that, or fingernails chalkboard type deal, where I need to get that space. That's how you respond, is you create a space in between what is occurring and whatever you're going to do next, the next right step. So can you talk a little bit about how you would recommend responding versus reacting?
Absolutely. And I love that. This is all about what we talk about at Limitless Minds. There's power in the pause. There's power in that pause, because it's the pause that lets you respond intentionally, closer to your best self, versus react impulsively, which we all have done, if we're being honest, right? There are 2 kinds of people in this world: people who have impulsively reacted and people who lie about the fact that they've impulsively reacted. Like, we've all done it, right? My favorite way to create this space is, get this, I know it sounds pretty obvious, actually ask for it. So I might say something, if I notice the signs in myself that I'm about to react, my heart starts beating faster. Maybe I'm clenching my jaw, because that's something I do when I'm really angry or feeling defensive. Or maybe I'm even like clenching or unclenching my hands, or I find myself so eager to respond that I literally don't even know what else is coming out of the person's mouth. I do something like this. I say, I need a few minutes to wrap my head around this. Let's circle back to this in 20. Okay. Literally, it can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, the trick though, Josh, is that you have to be good to your word. You can't just push something out, push it under the rug, or put the pause button on it and never come back to it, because over time you'll teach other people that they actually need you to give them your answer right then, because otherwise they'll never get it. So you have to be true to your word. If you say, let's come back to it, give them a time and come back to it then. And then during your break, this is the time to do the strategies that help us get to neutral. Yep. This is the time to take 5 slow breaths. This is the time to go to the bathroom and splash cold water on your face. There's actually good research to suggest that the change in temperature does something to regulate our emotional system, the emotional parts of our brain. This is the time to, I think this is one of your favorites, go outside. right?
Yes.
Like take a walk outside. So you can use that pause to your own power so that when you come back, you're coming back to talk about the problem, not about your anger, right?
Not about your own emotions or
And
their own emotions either. And I think
precisely.
that's you just kind of nailed the one of the other steps that I think you can do in that pause
Yeah,
is really evaluate what is completely in your control.
absolutely.
So in that's by the way another one of the six
Strategy.
is to really understand exactly what you can control in any circumstance. We can't control other people, believe it or not. I know we think we can. Uh,
Maybe
I
we
know
wish
this because
we
I
could.
have a teenage son and a 12-year-old, and I'm married. So I know that you can't control anybody else as much as you try, right? But
Right.
what you can do is you can take that step, you can take that space and go, okay, we're in this conversation. It's pretty negative. I'm getting charged. I'm getting triggered. I'm feeling myself in that space.
Mhm.
All right, what can I really control in this manner? Well, I can control my reactions, my responses. I can control what I focus on,
Yep.
and I can control what I say next moving forward.
Absolutely. Those are the things that are always in your control. What we say and what we do are always, always, always within our control. And we stack the deck for success if we take that pause
Yeah.
over the kind of control and the kind of output we'll have over what we say and what we do. And it's very freeing in a way, maybe a little bit scary and freeing at the same time, to accept the fact that you cannot control how somebody else responds
Or how they feel,
or
even
how they
believe it or
feel.
not.
Right. You can influence it. You
Sure,
can impact it.
absolutely you can influence,
And
but you
right,
can't control.
ultimately you can't control it, right? Like let's not pretend we exist in vacuums. You certainly can influence it. This is not, a blanket do whatever you want because, you can't control what other people react. That's not what we're saying. Instead, it's really about acknowledging and accepting where should you put your effort so that you're working smart and not just hard, right? And this leads us into probably, Josh, the most important strategy out of our toolbox in dealing with negative behavior in other people.
And what would that strategy be?
Don't try to fix it. I'm going to say that again because it is so important. And it is probably one of the first things that I tell someone when they come to me in whatever capacity they come to me, a friend, a client, a patient, whatever, with an issue like this. I say to them, what would it be like for you if you didn't try to fix this? And I get what just happened. They don't have a response. They're kind of like, oh, right? So much of our own distress when we're around other people who are behaving negatively. Let's take an example like complaining, right? Or blaming is our mistaken belief that it's our responsibility to change their mind,
Mm-hmm.
to get them to act differently. And it's only after we realize the best way to help ourselves or even to model for our teams around someone who is engaging in a certain type of negative behavior is to recognize if I try to fix this right now, it's unlikely to be received well, and it's very likely to make me more frustrated or angry. Let's give it an example, right? This has happened with you and me. When I've come to you and I've been, should we say venting? That's a
Sure.
nice way of saying
Good
it.
word.
So I've been venting, and what I really want in those moments, before we've had that open discussion where I've said to you, hey, this is actually what I'm looking for. Sometimes you have come back at me as I've been venting to you, which maybe you're labeling as negative, right? And you've said, I totally hear you, but you should think of it this way instead. Now, Here's another example of something that we've all done. Even if we've gone to school for 10 years, cough, cough, Julia, we still do this sometimes, right? We jump to solution, we try to fix, right? Because we know each other very well, Josh, when you've done that, I think I took a chance once and I said to you, hey, that's not helping me. I need to work through this. And you said, you're right. I jumped to solutions. What can I do to support you right now? And man, that was perfect. And that was a great model for what all of us can do when we have maybe somebody in our lives that we can't necessarily cut out. we can't just cut off all contact with. They're engaging in something that's sort of bothering us. And we have this instinct to try and fix it. And if we go in with this unsolicited advice, at best, the person feels shut down or dismissed. And at worst, they are angry and they're like, what the heck? And you get the yeah, but train that keeps coming, right? And so the best way to respond, once you've accepted that you can't fix this in this moment, is again, go to empathy and say, hey, I can see this sounds really tough for you, or I can see this is really tough for you. How can I best support you right now?
It's interesting too, because I think a lot of times we dive into this solution orientation.
Absolutely.
Based on our own need for control. We want to have a say in the matter, right? And thus, what ends up happening is you're not actually showing up for the other person. You're thinking about yourself, like at a subconscious level, mostly.
Sure.
But when you switch it around and you go, hey, how can I support you? You're actually taking control back in a lot of ways, where you're deciding, hey, I'm here for support right now. I decided I'm going to be in this lane, and thus I'm opening myself up to them to direct me a little bit. But I've chosen that, and that's the whole key, is that power of choice and the power to decide I'm here for support versus I am here to fix this and take care of it so I can move on to the next thing.
Exactly. And if you think about it, that first thing that you said, right? Choosing how to show up in that situation based on how you're objectively evaluating it, that is the essence of neutral, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? Go to truth. What does this situation require of me? And so often you're right. We want to feel valuable. We want to feel in control. And so many of us jump to offering solutions because we believe we have all the answers. Sometimes we believe we have all the answers before we've even heard what the problem actually is. Right? No, I've done that. Right. And so recognizing that you can't fix it, right? It's not incumbent on you to fix it. Remove that responsibility from your head and instead pay attention to what's going on in the situation, right? And sometimes that involves asking the person what they want from you. My favorite, I'm going to refer to what I call the marriage saver question. And I may know that both from a professional standpoint and a personal one, is, are you looking for my support while you process through something? Or are you looking for my advice or help to solve a problem?
That's amazing. Karen and I, we use, hey, do you want me to pull out the nail or do you want me to listen?
Yes, there's a fabulous video that many of our talented coaches and room tilters have used about, it's not about the nail, right? Like you think you have this idea of exactly what's wrong with the person in front of you. And if you could just fix that, they'd feel fine. But the truth is that's based more on your assumption than on the truth of what's going on for them. And so the only way we can really be neutral in situations when we're dealing with somebody that's approaching us with this behavior is to listen.
Yeah.
And to listen with as little judgment as we can, right?
And I think this goes into the last two pieces that we want to talk about. The first one is leading by example.
Yeah.
So if if I go down this road of negativity with the other person, then I'm not leading by example. I'm just I'm hopping on the train and I'm rolling down the way. So we don't want to do that. But what we also want to do is the way you lead by examples is you can set some boundaries
Absolutely.
for yourself in your own mind and for the other person. A lot of times that is where people get in trouble, is the lack of setting boundaries. And I know that's like kind of a weird thing to say, but once you set those boundaries, you're actually leading by example.
Absolutely. And I think that, boundaries can be a hot topic. I think because there's some belief that setting boundaries is too rigid, too limiting. Then there's the alternative belief of there's always boundaries, right? Like, or there are too many boundaries. I think that the great way to set boundaries around negative behavior from other people is to be very aware of when you yourself need that power pause, or when you yourself need to remove yourself from the situation to get back to neutral, to get back to baseline, before you can be a productive part of it. And so the best boundaries to set are the boundaries. Remember, a boundary is set for yourself. If you're trying to set a boundary for other person, that's actually a demand. So a boundary is set for yourself, right? Here are two things that can always be a boundary. Where do you take your body, right? Like, where are you physically present? And when do you need to leave, right? So if somebody is on a complaint train and you've tried to lead by example and use some of these strategies, and it's not quite getting anywhere, you are not obligated to be their limitless sounding board, right? Like, it's okay for you to say, I hear this is tough for you. I want to be able to be there to support you. At this point, I need to transition away to something else. Let's check back in a day or so, and I'd love to hear more. That would be probably the way I would do it, because I tend to set my boundaries. If you think of boundaries like coffee, you've got like the straight up espresso, and then you've got the latte boundary, which is kind of said with a little bit more honey and sweetness. I'm more of a latte gal, right? Like, it's okay. However you set them, make sure that they are working for you, but you need to take care of yourself around this type of behavior so that you can do all of the other things and ultimately lead by example for yourself and the people in your life.
Yeah, that's it. So when you look at it, here are the 6. Ready? We're gonna list them.
We're gonna go through.
1, set some boundaries. Number
Absolutely.
2, listen more, judge less. Number 3, do not, under any circumstances, try to fix it. Number 4, respond versus react.
Right.
Number 5, determine what is in your control. And last but not least, lead by example.
Absolutely. And if you do all of those things, we'd love to hear how you have found yourself adapting, changing, being less negatively affected by negative behavior in your day or in your life. And thank you so much for tuning in with us today. We love having these conversations, don't we, Josh?
Yeah, we do.
This is like one of my favorite parts of my job.
More conversations on Monday, 12:30.
More conversations to come. We're back in the Mind Gym on Monday. Who do we have on Monday? We might have to pull it up from our lovely producer on Monday.
Got Andy and Matt Miller. Andy and Matt Miller.
That's going to be a good crew. Andy
Absolutely.
Reitz and Matt Miller are with us in the Mind Gym on Monday. In the meantime, Club Limitless family, have a fabulous, fabulous weekend, and we'll be back in the Mind Gym at 12:30 EST on Monday. Pound it.